Welcome back to the Center in the City podcast. My name is Wade Brill, and I am so glad you are here. In today's solo episode, we're talking about that lovely and really common trap we can all get into called the productivity trap. We're going to discuss how to balance our drive and that inner ambition and motivation while also feeling present, while also feeling like a human being instead of a machine. This is such a juicy topic because so many of my clients experience this. I myself experience this. This is so human, especially in our modern day world where our brains and our bodies are still trying to figure out, what does enough mean? What does success mean? What does it mean to be a human in this modern day world when machines, computers, AI, everything around us is working harder and faster? Yet, isn't the point of all the technology to take some things off of our plate to offer us more freedom, offer us more flexibility? And yet, it somehow has had a little bit of the opposite reverse impact. So, we're going to explore all of that today. So, whether you're listening on a walk while you're cooking or just chilling out in your space, let's settle in and let's get centered. A few weeks ago, my husband and I were in Paris. He was there for work. We were doing a week stopover. And I had this inner conflict of, oh my God, I'm in Paris. I, should be seeing museums and I should explore and I should shop and I should be at every cafe and be tasting every croissant and, all the things that you do in Paris. It's been over 10 years, 12 years since I've been there. And yet I had this other part of me that was like, no, you're working. You're not on vacation. You need to sit and work. And this productivity anxiety started to creep in. It felt like something heavy was being put on my shoulders and my energy was being made to sit down and stay still. So as I was planning my day and thinking about, okay, where do I want to work and how do I want to work and what do I want to get done and what do I want to see in the city, and trying to balance both, this inner anxiety of being productive was really loud. And I noticed oh, my mind is starting to equate needing to be productive with how busy I am, and busy meaning how much I'm actually sitting at my computer. So my mind wasn't thinking, oh, by you going to a museum or you going on a walk or you going to explore the city and evoking some creativity or taking some time to think about those projects you're working on as part of work. It was like, no, you need to sit down, be in front of a computer, and that is being productive. And when you're busy, you're being productive. And for me specifically, I'm curious what comes up for you, but for me specifically, the productivity isn't just how much am I doing, it's at what speed am I doing. So it's not just, do I have a to-do list to do? It's, oh, you better do your to-do list and you better do it really fast. And you must kind of speed up internally. Side note, we've talked about pace before on this podcast. You must rev up that inner pace to work harder, faster right now. And that's some of the hurry sickness coming in. We've also talked about that on the podcast. I'll link it in the show notes. This need to do things with speed, and how speed can also create this false sense of busyness that can be really soothing to our nervous systems because of how we've been programmed, not because it's actually safe and easeful. And it has taken me a long time to create more ease in my nervous system so that I can recognize when that inner pace and that inner need for productivity speeds up, and how I can be in relationship with it in a better way, in a more skillful way. So we're going to talk about that, of some ways to be with that beautiful productivity anxiety. So I want to pause here and welcome you to check in with yourself. Where in your life, or where in a recent memory, or maybe it's even just today, where have you experienced some productivity anxiety, maybe some hurry sickness as well, this need to speed up, to be productive, to do. So take a moment to reflect on that. And then let's also pause and explore this bigger concept that we get to work within, which is, how are we defining productivity? How are we defining productivity? And what's maybe a new definition of productivity we can offer ourselves that actually supports our well-being, so that we can have both well-being and impact? Because sometimes our minds, I see this with my clients, they divide them. We either are pushing and driving and destroying our bodies and our brains, or we're resting. And we let them be separate things, when there's actually a place of balance that we can aim for, not necessarily strive for, but that we can aim for, that we can find in a less harmful way for our bodies and brains, and also a place where we can have that impact for ourselves and for others, for the world. For me, I've been noticing my definition of success has shifted. And like, the more that I've gotten clear on my definition, the more I feel empowered about it. When I think about, what does success mean to me? It's not busyness. To me, success is being able to have flexibility and freedom. And part of that is having income, financial stability, learning how to untangle that working more and working harder doesn't necessarily equate to more money. And more money doesn't necessarily equate to success. And so for me, there's a sweet spot of, how much am I bringing in that's enough to create the lifestyle for my family, for myself, for generosity, and also what is a lifestyle that provides that sense of flexibility and freedom. And for me, that's the recipe of success. So I welcome you to pause and think about your own definition of success. Get really clear on that first. Because if you don't have your own definition of success, culture, society, your family, all of these various inputs are going to tell you something else. And you're going to wonder, what are you working towards? Because if it's not your own definition, you're living by somebody else's definition. So getting clear on these modes of being and doing can be really helpful in orienting why. Why am I doing what am I doing? Why is it important to me? We've been culturally conditioned for productivity to equate our self-worth, hustle culture, capitalism, social media, comparison to being busy. You know, I posted something the other day on Instagram, and I was pausing in, you're getting a behind the scenes here, of like, does this feel in alignment to post? And I don't know if you've seen this, but sometimes people share in their stories like, I had this many clients today and I got this done and I went to the gym and like, and there's check boxes by everything. And I started writing a post like that in my stories, which I typically don't do. And I noticed, I'm not going to do check boxes, because check boxes to me feel like this list of to-dos, versus I put little star lights on them, whatever that emoji is, to just symbolize, wow, these were ways that I got to take action today that felt really good and I'm really excited about. And so even just like for me, switching that checkbox to a different emoji that felt more enlivening and inspiring was a shift that connected me back to my definition of success, instead of it feeling like these productivity boxes. And it's so interesting because studies and research shows that our brains are wired for task completion dopamine hits, meaning that it feels really good when we get shit done, when we cross something off of our to-do list. We get that hit of dopamine that makes us feel really productive and worthy. And then we also start to equate that sense of dopamine to worth. And then when we don't get that, when we're resting or when we're chilling out or maybe not as busy or not as productive, it easily triggers feelings of guilt, which then can spiral people into not enough, not doing enough. And we all know when we enter those spirals how fun they can be. Research also demonstrates, and this research comes from Stanford University, that working over 50 hours per week actually reduces productivity. And when we are overdoing it, when we're leading ourselves to burnout, it's like, why? That decreases our creativity. It lowers our quality of work. It affects our sleep. It affects our well-being. It affects our happiness. It affects how we connect and communicate with those around us. So it's like, why would we push ourselves past 50 hours a week? I think even, past, I don't even think we need to be working 40 hours a week. That's a whole other story. Why do we need to push ourselves past these productivity points? Because the list of to-dos is always going to be there. And getting really clear about timelines and capacity and capability is really important so that you can prioritize and really work on what is needed in that moment and the bigger projects that are going to have bigger impact than all the tiny things that can drain our energy and attention and creativity. So let's pause here and check in. Like, what are some signs that you notice for yourself where you're entering a productivity trap, where you start to feel that productivity anxiety creep back in? Do you start to feel anxious or guilty when you're resting? Are you constantly checking your to-do list but feeling unfulfilled? Are you rushing through tasks without being present? Are you struggling to celebrate your wins because you're already on to the next thing? So what typically happens for you that you notice, I might be stuck in a little bit of a productivity loop? And if we expand this, we might start to notice, I've been in a productivity loop for a really long time, or that's my natural conditioning. And you might notice that it's also affecting your cortisol levels, your stress hormones in your body, where your nervous system is, for whatever reasons, whether it's past events, extreme trauma, a lot of stress, where you're feeling like you constantly have to be on and doing. And so that sense of busyness, that sense of hurry sickness might always feel there, even when you're not sitting your butt down at your computer or in your office or jumping on calls. So paying attention to both ands, like this productivity loop could be its own thing, but it also could be connected to something bigger. For me, I know that growing up in New York City, I've talked about this before, there's just this inner pulse and pace that I have had to learn how to decouple from. And sometimes I crave it. I crave that energy. I crave that stimulation. But I also notice, like, am I craving it from a place of creativity, or am I crave it from a place of distraction, from a place that's going to tell me I'm worthy because I'm around this kind of productivity energy, this hustle? So pay attention for yourself of how is it showing up. Get really curious and be really kind to yourself as you're exploring and investigating. So, of course, I want to offer a couple of tools and practices that can support you taking these mindful moments throughout your day to check in and come back to your center, come back to your sense of self in this equanimous, in this balanced state of mind and body, so that you can feel present and connected to your drive, that you can still do things that have impact and know you are enough just as you are, that your sense of worth is not determined by how much you got done on your to-do list, that your sense of worth is not determined by how many hours you sat in front of a computer, that your sense of worth is so much greater just as you are, wherever you are. So first tool is to redefine what success means to you. Really think about it. Create that as your goalpost, if that's even important to you. Maybe success is not important to you, but really understand, why am I driven? What's my drive for? What am I working towards? So that, again, you can understand why being productive matters to you and what's the level of productivity and where is that coming from within you versus, again, this default setting of busy hustle. So another tool to explore, and this is a mindset shift that a lot of my clients really find helpful, because most of my clients are ambitious. So there's this I'm going to take a big bite out of whatever this project is, and they work really hard. And so to remind them the 80% rule, instead of striving for perfectionism, and perfectionism being pushing beyond your limits sometimes, to remind yourself that you can aim for 80% of your effort, and that 80% of your effort is probably 100%. That we think sometimes you have to push 120, 150 to get whatever done, or to be productive, or to be successful. But even working at 80% is smart, because that allows us to have more sustainability power, so that we're not heading straight to burnout. We're not doing these sprints that can end up running us into a brick wall. So many high performers recognize that when they're working at 80%, they actually have more spaciousness for creativity, which of course improves all of our work and improves all of our impact, instead of maximizing and maxing out their energy. Another really powerful practice here is to do what's called the enoughness check-in. And it's a simple question that you can ask yourself when you're planning your day, at the beginning of the day, or maybe you're in the middle of the day and it's just been one of those days that's gotten away from you, and you're like, oh, I'm having trouble getting going, or I feel like I haven't done anything today. And it's to pause and ask yourself, if I did just one thing today that felt meaningful, what would it be? What's one thing? What could I put my head on the pillow at night and say, I did, and feel really proud? Because again, this is switching the mindset from I have to do these 10 things to feel proud, to feel successful, to feel like I've done enough. And when we can switch it to just what's one thing? What's one thing I can get started, or what's one thing I can complete that's going to support me? That is enough. If you recognize that for you is still feeding the productivity anxiety, that you're still getting in that productivity loop, I welcome you to take it even a step further. And before doing anything in your day, even at night before your head goes to the pillow, is to put your hand on your heart and say, I am enough just as I am. I choose me. I am enough just as I am. I choose me. And feel your self-worth already in your body without any of the doing. And if you want some more support with this, feel free to reach out for one-on-one coaching. We can explore if we're a fit, reach out for support with somebody else. Take some time to really connect to that place of self-worth, because if we don't heal that place, if we don't feel our self-worth and know it, or even just practice being with it, it's going to affect many areas of our life, like spiraling us in self-doubt, like keeping us stuck in patterns that are unhelpful. So here might be your wake-up call for something greater to pay attention to. Switching into some more tactics for my left brain people. When you think about productivity, it's like if you are wanting to do work and impact, like go for it. And I'm not here to say that being productive, working hard is not worth it. However, are you also taking breaks for yourself, right? Studies show that our brain works best, our body and our brain work best in these rhythms of 90-minute cycles. So working for 90 minutes and then taking 2 to 15 minutes, ideally 15 minutes of break so that you can reset and then come back. Do you have that scheduled in your day? For some of us, that might not feel feasible because of back-to-back calls, but it's like, okay, what are you doing to buffer your schedule so that you can have a little bit more control of your schedule? And a lot of people think that they can't have control, but you really can. If you talk to your manager, you talk to your leadership about, hey, I'm going to just buffer in some of these breaks, they will typically support you because they also want you to rest. They also want you to be at your best. So, what are you doing for yourself to support taking those times for pause and renewal? And maybe those moments of pause, you're standing up, you're stretching, maybe you're going on a brief walk, maybe you're looking out the window at some trees or nature, maybe you're closing your eyes for a few moments. What are you doing to care for yourself? Getting a drink of water, doing a quick little exercise to get the cardio engaged, get that butt awake if you've been sitting all day. Like, what are you doing for yourself? Are you meditating for a few moments? Again, there's so many things you can do to help restore your attention and energy. Another really helpful practice here is to redefine what does a whole productive life look like. So what I mean by that is we equate being productive to just work. And for most of us who are very ambitious in North American culture, recognize that most of the time and energy is spent on work. But if we look at a whole life productivity view and we get clear on, what does a whole life of being productive look like? We start to think, what makes me feel alive outside of work? Isn't it productive to also invest in my relationships? Isn't it also productive to invest in my health, right? Because if we don't have our health, what do we have? Health is wealth, in my opinion. If we're not investing in our creativity, what do we have? So really expanding our mindset to think about what is a productive life can be really helpful to zoom us out so that we're not stuck in these work productivity loops that are just causing anxiety. Going back to this Paris trip, I sat with myself and I noticed that anxious productivity feeling. And instead of feeling like, okay, I'm going to trap myself in my hotel room and sit here and be productive, it was like, how can I engage a both and? How can I play in the city, go on a nice walk, take an adventure, explore, and also go work from a cafe, get those creative juices flowing? And that's what I did. If you follow me on Instagram and social media, you might see a post that I did around that where I picked a cafe that was like 5 miles away and had a little mini adventure that brought me to my workspace and got to work for a few hours and then had a mini adventure on my way back. So remind yourself that being productive, being successful can look like many different things. We just have to expand out of these boxes that we've created for ourselves or that we've been conditioned in. Another powerful question, and I shared this on social media as well this week, is to notice when you're coming from a place of urgency and that place of productivity anxiety, and to pause and ask yourself, what would it look like to do this task from a place of ease? And what shifts for you? Does the task still feel important? Do you notice just your internal relationship to the task shifts and that feels more spacious and more helpful? As we bring this episode to a close, I want to remind you that true productivity isn't about doing more, about sitting in front of a computer screen feeling imprisoned. It's about doing more of what feels in alignment to your values and supports you connecting to energy, vitality of life. Because let's remember, you are a human being, not a human machine. So you get to find that balance that works for you and the life that you want to be creating. Thanks so much for listening to the Centered in the City podcast. I would love to hear from you about what resonated with this episode. What's coming up for you with these various reflection questions? Reach out to me on Instagram at OneWade or send me a message linked in the show notes. If you like this theme of the podcast, check out the other episodes that are linked in the show notes in that similar conversation around pace, around hurry sickness. And until next time, stay centered.